Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to pause as we welcome everyone into the webinar today. Welcome. My name is Noemi Guevara, and I am the Director of Alumni Engagement here at California State University, Long Beach. Thank you for joining us for our next edition of the 49er Industry Chat. Before we start, we just want to let you know this session is being recorded and it will live on our website. We also encourage you to use our Q&A box located below to submit any questions for our guest speaker throughout the chat. And then now I would like to introduce our moderator for the chat. Alice LaViolette is a double alumna, earning her degree in psychology in 1969 and 1980. She was recognized as a distinguished alumna in 2011 for the College of Liberal Arts and currently serves as a committee chair for the CSULB Alumni Council. Alice, thank you for moderating the chat today, and now I turn it over to you.
Oh, thanks a lot, Noemi. And I'd like to welcome Celeste Ahl. Really impressive bio. Celeste is a senior associate at Alston Bird, LLP, one of the nation's 50 largest law firms. Her practice is focused on real estate finance, and she has previous experience practicing general corporate law with an emphasis on both mergers and acquisitions. Celeste attended the UC Irvine School of Law and graduated with the class of 2014. She graduated from Cal State Long Beach in 2011 with a Bachelor of Science in International Business, Bachelor of Arts in Business Economics, and a minor in Political Science. In her free time, Celeste is a lecturer in CSULB's College of Business. She also serves on the board of directors of a nonprofit named Woodcraft Rangers, and on the Women United Cabinet of United Way. To unwind, she likes to study wine and is a level 2 sommelier. Please welcome to today's chat, Celeste Ahl. Thanks, Celeste.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I kick this off with just talking a bit about my background and
I wanted to ask you how your path led you to practice law and real estate finance.
Sure. So I came down to Cal State Long Beach as a business major, always knew that that was something I was interested in. And at the time, I thought I wanted to do something with international business because that sounded fun. And so was an international business major and going through taking the sort of generic business classes that you have to as prerequisites. And that led me to Business Law 220, which at the time was focused primarily on contract law. And I was one of the only people in the room, I think, that thought that contracts were legitimately just so interesting. I started spotting contract issues in everyday life and was engaged, and everyone around me was like, this sounds very dry. I'm like, no, this is so fun. So that kind of sparked me into that idea. And then I also took a business ethics class. And ethics was something that always concerned me. I wanted to make sure that whatever I was doing with my time helped make the world a better place. And, you know, as a business major, I wanted to make sure that I was helping businesses to act ethically. And when we went through all of the case studies, it occurred to me that a lot of times ethical lapses weren't because, you know, the board of directors was sitting in a room talking about how do we screw over a bunch of little people. It was just they had an idea, they had a bad idea, and there wasn't anyone in the room to stand up and say, hey, have you thought about doing it this other way? Or have you thought about all of the negativity that could come out when this goes wrong? And I realized that lawyers are kind of in a prime position because that's what we're there for. We're there to not only solve the problems that your clients have, but prevent them from creating new problems. And while sometimes that does mean saying no or rerouting them from where they originally wanted to go, they trust you. You're their counselor. So you do have a unique position do that. So between the two of those, I thought, hey, I think I want to be a business lawyer. And I'm going to be honest, fundamentally backwards on how I thought that would work. I thought I wanted to be a businesswoman that knew some stuff about law. Got to law school and realized, well, that's not how that works. You're a lawyer that happens to know some stuff about business. But still found law school really interesting, enjoyed it tremendously. I specialized as much as I could in business law. And my first job out of law school was sort of a corporate generalist, with a bit of an emphasis on mergers and acquisitions. And that was interesting because you got to see sort of all areas of corporate issues, from starting a business, running it, hiring employees, trademarking stuff, labeling. I mean, anything a business does, we had our hands in it somehow. All the way to the very end when they are successful, they're selling their business off, and they're going to go retire with a bunch of money. And so that was fun because you learn so much, but it's also very tiring because you constantly have to learn so much. And mergers and acquisitions particularly are always on a very fast pace. So I decided I wanted to be a little bit more of a specialist. And that real estate was something I was interested in. So I switched firms up to Alston Bird. They had an opening for me that was sort of perfect. They wanted to retrain someone who had a general corporate background into being a real estate finance attorney, which sounded perfect to me. So I jumped ship, and that's what I've been doing ever since. So more specifically, what I do is I represent lenders who are originating commercial mortgages. So it's a bit of finance, it's a bit of real estate, still a lot of corporate law, but it's great because I can sort of build on a knowledge base and start becoming an expert in issues rather than having to retrain myself on something new constantly. And here I am.
So did you have any mentors from either the corporate legal world or faculty members who mentored you in your early career?
I certainly did. So Kathleen Lacey, also from the College of Business and Director of Legal Studies, she was one of the professors in the business ethics class that was, that influenced my decision to become a lawyer. Very, very caring, really concerned about her students' well-being. She has a legal background as well. And she kind of became like my second mother here on campus. So she helped, she was the one that taught me the difference between transactional law and litigation. She helped kind of describe the different routes corporate attorneys can take. And she actually, even when I was applying to UC Irvine, she knew the dean at the time. They went way back. And so she, set up a lunch for me and the dean after I'd gotten in. So I got to know him. She was, very helpful and provided a lot of guidance. And she and I are still good friends. Like we keep in touch regularly.
So what is the difference between transactional law and litigation? So
litigation is probably what most people think of when they hear the word attorney. It's you go to court, something that a dispute has already arisen, and you're there to, try to win for your client. Transactional, I think probably the only pop culture reference people may have been aware of for that is Suits, which frankly I've never seen, so I can't even tell you if it's accurate. But transactional is kind of more on the back end when deals are getting done. So everyone's happy, nothing has gone wrong yet. You have two parties that want to work together, and you just make sure that when they do work together, it goes smoothly. Because is the broadest way I can explain that.
Okay, and what brought you to Cal State Long Beach? How did you end up at Cal State Long Beach or start there?
Sure. Well, I had the good fortune of being a President's Scholar. I grew up in Bakersfield, which is, sort of a small town, but then I also grew up in the southeast corner of Bakersfield, which is, a small kind of farmer population within an already small town. And when I found out about the President's Scholar Program, it seemed, perfect. They had a good business program that I was interested in. It seemed like I would get a lot of firsthand contact with the professors, who had actual industry experience, and all of that really appealed to me. And I was very, very fortunate to get that scholarship, because I don't know that I would have been able to go to college at all if it hadn't been for that.
Well, that's terrific, Celeste. I was going to tell everybody who's listening that Celeste is very open to questions, but you're getting them anyway, so this is good. As an undergraduate student, how did you select where to go for law school, and what should students do to prepare if they are looking into a possible law career?
Sure. So I'm going to reverse the order of that. And if you're thinking about going to law school, the biggest advice I would have to say to you is be very honest about why. I enjoy my legal career, but it's your whole life, and you need to be pretty prepared for that. So if a lot of common reasons people select law school are, my parents want me to, or I'm not good at math, but I need to make money. I just like the idea of being called a lawyer. Quite honestly, probably none of those are good enough reasons. You should go to law school if your life passion is to do the type of things lawyers do, because it's a tremendous investment of your time and, frankly, money. I mean, law school is expensive. Being a lawyer is a job and a half at least. So if this isn't what you want to spend, at least 10 years of your life doing, I would say gather more information, look, do a little bit more soul searching. But if you are just, I want to be a lawyer, this is what I want with my life. A few things to keep in mind when you're trying to select a law school. One is it's not a bad idea to stick with law schools in the state where you want to practice. And that's a little bit different than advice you'd get for other graduate programs. And the reason I say that is you have to pass the bar, and the bar is state specific. And the law school you go to will be teaching towards that state's bar. So I know it's tempting, and I wanted to do this at first. I was like, I want to go to New York for law school. But I didn't want to practice in New York, and I'm very glad I don't practice in New York. And I'm glad that I'm in retrospect, I'm glad I didn't go to a New York school. It wouldn't have been disqualifying. I could have come back and practiced still in California, but I would have had to self-teach a whole new set of laws and then pass our bar. So, it's not a bad idea to stick to schools in the state where you want to practice. Although, worst case scenario, you just have to teach yourself another state's law later. Other than that, rankings with law schools do matter a bit in terms of certain access to job opportunities. So if you really want to work at a big law firm or, a Fortune 500 company, you do want to stick to one of the higher ranked law schools. I would be really wary of law schools that aren't accredited. They can produce, they certainly have produced good attorneys, but it can be a tougher road. And then after you've kind of narrowed it down, you have your pool of schools that interest you, I would go physically visit all of them. And I know that seems overwhelming, but it's a huge investment. And so you want to make sure it's a good fit. And one of the things that really stood out to me for UC Irvine is everyone was legitimately happy and supportive of each other. And you can tell. I visited a school in New York that's not to be named, very, very good school, but we couldn't get people to stop and give us directions to, the admissions office. They were just that stressed and frankly rude. And I was like, okay, so maybe I don't want to spend 3 years of my life in this atmosphere. So yeah, talk to alumni if you can, talk to current students. Most law schools will let you sit in on classes if you ask them ahead of time. So ask to do that. But I would go and physically visit if that's at all within the realm of possibility.
So I'm going to go a little out of order with the questions because this one seems to fit in this time, which is how did you prepare for the Lsat?
I self-studied, which frankly is not recommended. If I could go back and do it again, I would have invested in a prep course. At the time, it seemed like my only option because I was taking 21 units and had 2 jobs, and I just didn't think that I had the time. And it worked out okay because I happened to be, good at test taking. But I am sure that I would have done better if I had taken a prep class. And there are some, really good options out there. So, several have different learning styles depending on what fits you best. So if you can take a prep course, it's recommended because, you can't really get out of it. Lsat is a huge factor in getting admitted. So it's a worthwhile investment.
So how do you continue to stay abreast of the changes in law and policy?
It's a mixture of things. Part of it is our firm is very good about holding regular trainings. We have at least 1 hour of training every week. We also get, blast emails every time a major law changes. One of the partners or senior associates at the firm will write an article summarizing what the change was and send it around. But it's also just being aware of the world around you to the extent you can. And, granted, I'm not great at this, but read the news, watch, just be aware of the things that are happening because a lot of time law is, a reaction to what's going on in society. So you can kind of see the trends coming if you just keep your eyes open. But it is a lot. There's a lot of the legal world is huge. So the good news is law firms publish a lot of those summaries just on their website. So if there's something that interests you, you can probably do a Google search for it. And if it's a article published by a reputable law firm, it's going to be accurate.
And these questions kind of piggyback on each other. What advice would you have for someone who is bound for law school but hasn't decided on their specialty? And then how did you distinguish your own specialty?
Yeah, I would say don't worry about it. Your first year of law school, your schedule will be set for you. It's going to be the equivalent of legal gen ed. So you'll have at least 1 year into law school to decide on that. And the other thing is you don't even have to pick a specialty in law school. You don't have a major or anything like that within law school. You get a Juris Doctorate. So if you want to take sort of generalized legal classes the entire time, that is a-okay. But if there is something that starts appealing to you, maybe it's because one of your general courses was really interesting, or you get an internship in a certain field, your second and third years of law school, that's when you can kind of play around with your electives and create a specialty path if you want to.
So this question is, do you have international clients? And if so, are you able to apply skills you gained with an international business degree? And are you glad you took political science as a minor versus a major?
The firm certainly has international clients. I don't often work with them. Sometimes, like we just did a huge portfolio where they had properties all over Europe and, Central America. And so that came in a little bit handy because I was able to get a handle. I knew I was able to read enough French and Spanish at least to give them a good running start with those types of documents. But, they engaged European and local counsel. So I will say it's not the international thing didn't become a huge part of my practice. It does help with travel, which is still, worthwhile endeavor. So no regrets there. And then in terms of political science, I'm going to be quite honest. I think I shouldn't have gotten a minor in it at all. I did it because I thought I needed to beef up my resume. And I had no necessary passion for it. It was literally something I wanted to put on my papers and move along with life. Life is what it is, no regrets, it all worked out fine. But what it ended up being for me is at least an extra semester in school. And everything I learned in the political science minor, I relearned in law school anyway. So it's not like it gave me a running start. Law school will take any majors. There's no, one of the top graduates from our law school was a music major. So don't feel like you have to force yourself into an area of study if that's not what you want to study. And while, English, poli-sci, history majors, those do tend to make up the majority of law students. Statistically, the majors that do best in law school come from hard sciences, engineering, physics, economics. Well, economics isn't a hard science, but more data-driven, analytic majors actually tend to do better in law school. So all of that to say is pick the major you like, pick a major you're going to do well in, and don't think that you need to pre-teach yourself law, because they do a great job of teaching you the law once you get there.
Thanks, Celeste. You said you unwind through studying wine and volunteering at Woodcraft Rangers and as a sommelier. I want to ask you, what are the Woodcraft Rangers? I wanted to ask that first.
So Woodcraft Rangers is a nonprofit whose core mission is to empower youth through sort of their natural curiosity and help guide them to creating pathways to purposeful lives. So it's actually one of the oldest nonprofits in LA. It goes back just about 100 years now, and it got its start sort of with the Boy Scouts. It was originally sort of a scouting organization, and the idea was that children are inherently good and inherently curious. And if you just let their natural curiosity combine with the wonders of the world around them, they will want to learn. They will want to find something productive to do with their time. And most of the time when kids get in trouble, it's because they don't have anywhere for that curiosity to go. And so there was a convention back in the early 1900s where Boy Scouts and several of the other big scouting organizations wanted to combine into one and just sort of have like a big national scouting thing. And Woodcraft Rangers just didn't like how exclusive Boy Scouts were. They wanted to include, all religions, everyone. And so they said, no, thank you. And that's kind of where the split, you got Boy Scouts and then you got Woodcraft Rangers, which stayed relatively smaller because they didn't join this big national cohort. But that, for the, 100 years of operating, that's also been one of the key focuses we have is on being, completely inclusive. So that's what we do. We provide a mix of after school programming, but also sort of outdoor and camp experiences, primarily for kids in underserved communities.
So how did you get involved with that organization, and how did you get involved as a wine sommelier?
Sure. So for Woodcraft, I was at a big conference that United Way was putting on. It was sort of a women in leadership conference, and it's 2016, and you follow, part of my job is to follow what's going on in the world. And a lot of times what's going on in the world can be very frustrating and discouraging. And so I don't remember who the speaker was at the time, but very impressive woman who just, nonstop fire and passion. And my question to her from the audience was, how do you get up every morning and watch what's going on in the world around you and not lose your passion for the fight? Like, how do you not get knocked down? And, she gave an answer. The CEO of Woodcraft, the new CEO of Woodcraft Rangers, she had just been hired, was sitting at a table behind me. And so she's like, well, if you feel like you need a way to make a difference, come learn more about my organization. And so she and I started chatting and we got lunch, and, I came to some of their events that they put on, met some of the team, and just their heart, their passion, the work that they were doing, and then just the joy of the kids that they were serving. I was like, I'm in. It's not going to change the whole world, but if I can make lives better of some people, then it's worthwhile use of my time. So jumped on the board. And for those of you considering becoming lawyers, you will be a hot commodity for nonprofit boards. They always want to have a lawyer on their boards. So that's the opportunities will come if that's something you're interested in.
So,
and then
okay.
wine. You asked about wine.
Yeah.
Wine. I've always been interested in wine, and frankly, it came from, coming from a small, poor area of Bakersfield and wanting to seem fancy enough to belong when I got down to LA area. So that was, young 20-year-old Celeste being a little needlessly pretentious. But as I got older and sort of developed my palate, wine became almost like a meditation of sorts. If you actually drink wine like you're studying it causes you to slow down and focus on one thing, like you would if you were doing a breath meditation or a mantra meditation. You're just being there in the moment and experiencing what it looks like, what it smells like, trying to draw out the certain notes. And then kind of there's also an added element of sort of a puzzle, like how would this note mix with this thing that I maybe want to eat, or what different wine should I pick? So it just became both, soothing because it's a way of just being in the moment, but also kind of a fun little game, try to figure out like, how could I make this wine? How could I make what I'm eating better by pairing it, or, doing that for my friends. So yeah, I started actually studying wine kind of unofficially in my mid 20s. And then got more serious about it 29, 30, started taking courses and doing the certification exams.
Thank you. So what qualities do you think someone needs to thrive as a lawyer, and what skills or qualities do you feel you lean on most in the course of your day and from day to day?
Sure. You need to like reading, because you are going to be reading a whole bunch. You need to be a good writer, although I will say it's probably a different type of writing than you'd think of. It's not like the flowery poetic writing. It's very linear, organized, straight to the point type of writing. Attention to detail. And you can learn that. If it's not something you're already good at, you can improve it by practicing, but it is something you'll have to improve. And then quite a bit of self-motivation, I would think. As a young associate, you're going to have your hand held a lot, and you're going to have people, nudging you. But then as you progress, a lot of it is, what you have to get done, and it's up to you to stay on top of yourself and do it. So anything, self-discipline, self-motivation. Speaking skills, especially if you want to be a litigator, you're going to need to work on your public speaking, but you can't get out of being a lawyer without speaking in front of groups regularly. But again, practice makes that better. And organization. Organization is big, because you will be, your inbox will just be flooded regularly. And so you need to have a way to keep on top of everything that needs to be done and not let any of the little details slip.
Thanks, Celeste. Do you have any tips for strengthening your writing skills?
Reading. I mean, some of the best ways to become a better writer is to read the writings of other authors. That's a bit harder, you know, in legal writing. You may have to read court cases or, gosh, pull up some public filings of a company if you want to read, you know, SEC statements or contracts or something like that. And then otherwise, practice makes perfect. And unfortunately, with legal writing, you probably wouldn't get a lot of practice doing that until you actually get to law school or out of law school. But yeah, the more you immerse yourself in what the writing is supposed to sound like, the better you'll be able to emulate that.
So there's a question asking about work at home, which you talked a little bit about before you got on this talk, but how did you adjust to working at home, or was it much of an adjustment? And how do you think or foresee that things will change in the future for you?
Yeah, for me, honestly, it wasn't a huge adjustment. And I think it may be, you know, a combination of my age and the fact that I took work home with me every night anyway. I always brought my laptop home so that I didn't have to be at the office until late at night. I will say I had to set myself up a bit for the longevity of it. So I, you know, set up a second monitor, got myself an official desk and an actual chair instead of lounging on the couch like I would if I was just for a few hours. But at least for the type of law I do, I don't see my clients in person very often. That was never a huge part of my practice. So, you know, my computer's at home instead of at the office. And quite honestly, I enjoy it more. I think I'm more productive and less stressed out. But in terms of where I think this is going to have a huge effect on service industries, especially ones who don't interact with clients regularly. In some ways, this was sort of a very extreme forced social experiment where, you know, employers have been arguing forever, are employees more productive or less productive if they're working in the office versus from home. And I think they're seeing now that their employees can be just as productive, if not more. At least that's the feedback we've been getting at our firm. So when you pair that with pretty high overhead cost savings, I would be nervous if I were a landlord that owns, you know, the big office buildings in metropolitan centers. I think they're going to have a lot of vacancies once leases expire, and their tenants are like, half of our staff is going to work from home, so we're going to downsize. So yeah, no, I haven't gotten official word on that, but from what I've heard, it seems like our firm at least is considering making, you know, at least part-time from home a standard option.
I know you talked about how you prepared for the Lsat, but did you feel that law school prepared you adequately for it or for your career?
For the career. I mean, yes and no. Anything in practice will always be different than the theory. I mean, that's true in an undergrad degree. It's true of a law school degree. Essentially, what you're being taught in law school is the basic foundation building blocks, and a lot of sort of basic legal terms, so that when you're going out there, like, you know, for example, you're reviewing a lease, and your client asks you, like, well, who do we have privity with? You don't have to be like, what's privity? Because you were taught that in law school. But you probably didn't review a whole bunch of leases in law school. So that's going to be a new experience to you, getting familiar with how does that industry work? What do the terms typically look like? That's all learning on the job. But one of the other things that law school does is it teaches you how to acquire new knowledge. It teaches you critical thinking skills. So that's why I said you don't have to specialize in anything in law school, because when you come out of it, you should have the ability to teach yourself just about anything. And that applies to whatever type of law you're going to end up practicing.
And did law school prepare you to take the bar exam?
It did, yeah. When it came time for me to study for the bar, a lot of it was just refresh, classes I had taken as a first year law student. And now I'm being tested on them again. There are a couple of classes that were on the bar that I didn't take in law school that I did have to teach myself, but that was my choice. I could have taken those in law school. I chose to take electives instead. So UCI, I felt prepared me very well.
What does a day in your field look like? Is there a typical day, or what would you say a day in your field looks like?
I don't know that there is such thing as a typical day. It really runs the gamut, especially because my field is so market driven, where if the market is healthy and lots of deals are happening, I might be working 18 hours a day. I might get up at 4:30, be on the computer by 5 in the morning, take 15 minutes for lunch and 15 minutes for dinner, but otherwise log off of the computer at midnight, and then start again the next morning. Or if the market is slow, or interest rates have risen or whatever, we're salaried, right? So you don't have that pressure to be on your computer doing nothing. So there have been days when the market is slow where I log on at 10 and kind of like poke around for a little bit until noon, and then go do some errands and work out. But the two extremes are not very often. It's not super often that I'm working 18 hours a day, and it's not often at all that I'm working 3 hours a day. Usually it's closer to like 12 or 13 hours, and it's going to be a lot of reviewing and marking up contracts, discussing some issues with clients, chasing down items that I haven't received yet that I need to receive. And again, yeah, a lot of reading, mostly reading.
You said something that just gave me a question, Celeste, which is when you talked about real estate or people that own buildings should be worried a little bit. I'm wondering about how in real estate law, how that's going to impact you, because I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple ways. One, we do all types of commercial buildings, from multifamily is considered commercial, retail, which granted at the moment isn't doing too hot, hotels, office buildings, industrial, so self-storage. So some of these types of buildings that are not doing so hot right now, we have more than enough business with the other types of commercial buildings to be doing just fine. But we can always help the landlords retool. So if office buildings are forever impacted by this, we can help our clients, maybe seek rezoning so that they can have a mixed use building, turn them into housing. Like there's always, the building is there, the land is there, it's going to be used for something, and it'll still be up to us to help them figure out what that's used for. But also in the very, very worst case scenario, we can be countercyclical. So we can do bankruptcy and loan modifications. So even when the market's bad for our clients, there is still use for us.
Do you ever think about opening your own law firm someday, and why or why not?
I've never thought of doing the own law firm route, just because my area of law is so specialized that they wouldn't really come to like a solo practitioner type of firm. But I have, one of my goals and still one of my major plans for retirement is becoming a real estate investor myself. And that was one of the things that interested me in going into real estate law, is kind of learning the ins and outs of the industry before jumping into this industry and learning by trial and error. So that's still on the plan, is to be able to take a step back eventually from owning real estate myself.
Okay, and these two questions kind of piggyback. How do you excel professionally without burning out? And also, how do you create a good work, social time or a work-play balance? And do you intentionally try to correlate what you do in your free time with your work and your work world to brand yourself or your firm? That's a complicated question. I hope you got it all.
Yeah, I'll just start, and if I miss anything, reroute me. So in terms of not burning out and finding balance, I think this just goes part and parcel with getting older a little bit. You cut out the unnecessary things. Like the activities that you only do because you feel socially obligated to, or the people in your life who, you don't really like them, but they keep inviting you to things. You get better about saying no to the stuff that doesn't truly seem worthwhile or bring you joy. But part of it is you need to be, I have to be super organized. I cannot afford to wake up every morning and be like, what am I supposed to be doing again? I have, maybe 2 minutes to spend on that. But every day I have already waiting for me a checklist plus like a calendar. So I know exactly what I'm doing and what order I'm doing it in. And part of it is picking your battles and delegating or, outsourcing the parts of your life that at that moment aren't things you can focus on. So, for example, I use a meal prep company because, for many years I tried to do it all. Like, I'm going to work all of these insane hours plus cook for myself. And that was a lie. It was never going to happen. What I ended up doing was eating fast food or takeout and becoming very unhealthy. And I did it because I thought that, cooking at home would be healthier and cheaper. Well, that wasn't how it worked out. It was more expensive from buying fast, takeout all the time and less healthy because I wasn't eating healthy things. So I just sort of bit the bullet and did one of those meal prep companies. And yes, it's not as cheap as cooking for yourself, but it's way cheaper than that game I was playing of buying takeout 2 meals a day every single day. So you just pick your battles, right? Some areas of your life that you would like to be doing yourself, you're not going to do yourself. And there's do I purposefully steer my extracurriculars towards? I did. For a long time, I tried to bulk up my resume and only do things that I thought the firm would like. And that burned me out like crazy. So I pared it down. So, the boards or the committees I'm on are ones that I actually enjoy, and I think that their purpose and their operations are good. I teach because honestly, teaching to me is fun. It's refreshing on it. The energy from the students, getting a little bit of that every week is refreshing. I would like to have more completely non-professional hobbies. That is an area that I need to work on for myself. COVID made it hard as well to have a social life, to have hobbies outside of work. But yeah, I'll get working on finding that sort of balance and check back in with you all.
Thanks, Celeste. And what advice would you give to students, CSULB students or recent grads who would like to practice law?
Yeah, get as much exposure to what the legal world actually is like as possible. Whether that's, AmeriCorps, for example, has an internship program you can do where you work at a self-help clinic. Whether it's becoming a law clerk or a paralegal even. I have a friend that graduated same year as me, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to be a lawyer. So she became a paralegal, and it gave her sort of inside access to what that world is like. Find an attorney and talk to them. Anything you can do to expose yourself to that lifestyle, because you're not just buying into doing law and whether or not you find that interesting. You're buying into a lawyer's lifestyle, which can be fairly intense. But then otherwise, try to figure out all of the types of law that are out there to see if one interests you. And there are so many types. Any event occurring in life, there's probably a lawyer behind it somewhere. There are business lawyers, but we can specialize too, right? You might have an entertainment type of attorney. You could have a sports agent. You can have space law. Southern California has SpaceX and stuff. I guarantee you there are space lawyers. So try to figure out if there's a type of law that interests you and go learn more about that specific type of law. And then, if you haven't graduated yet, keep your grades up as much as possible. Practice writing. Make sure you hone those skills quite a bit. Keep in touch with your professors because you will need a letter of recommendation, and they can give a much better letter if they know you personally a little bit than if I'm happy to write letters for my students, but sometimes I get one where it's like, hey, I haven't spoken to you in 2 years. Can you write me a letter? And it's like, yeah, I can. But at that point, the best I can do is look back at my grade book and reread the essays you submitted, and I'll do the best I can, but it's not going to be nearly as good as one that is more personalized. So make those personal connections with your professors. Study for the Lsat. Give yourself plenty of time. Assume that you will want to retake it. So take the summer Lsat instead of the fall one, just in case. And if you're happy with your score, then okay, cool. You don't have to retake it. Start visiting the law schools. That can take some time. It can take some money. Yeah. And then again, do the soul searching. Figure out, why do you want to be an attorney?
Well, are there any other questions? I guess our time actually is up. Celeste, thank you so much. This has been really interesting, and I love your enthusiasm, and thank you so much for sharing your time.
My pleasure. Happy to join you all.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Celeste, for sharing your experience and your advice to our current students and our alumni out there. Before we go, if anyone wants to connect with you, they could look for you on LinkedIn, but also they could email you at celeste.ahl@csulb.edu.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed, and please follow us on social media to learn about our future chats and any other events we have going. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
And Celeste